you're from, your organization, your member state, the country that you're from. Please put all of that in the chat so we know who we are in communications with. This is a type of fellowship that is so needed in this crazy world that we live in. So please make sure that you introduce yourselves by putting your name, your organization, and your country. And we're waiting. A few more people are joining us. This is such an exciting event. We are so proud of our young youth leaders, young professionals, and this cohort that has been developed. And we want to especially thank Eliza Willison and the Women Have Wings Foundation for making this possible. So thanks to all. And we want to give a shout out to Rachel and Annabelle and Hootie, who are leading this. And we're just very pleased to be here. So welcome. And I hope that you are as excited as I am about this first session in the series given by our global leaders. And I will turn the session over to our hosts. Oh, by the way, I am Pamela Morgan. I'm co-chair of NGO-CSW New York, along with my co-chair, Ivy Cook. And we are the hosts of this, and we are pleased to have you as our guest. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this introduction and also for the chance to be part of the Global Youth Fellows for Gender Equality and the opportunity of coming together through this series. And welcome to everyone who is joining tonight or today, wherever you are. For this webinar on the Youth Preparation Series hosted by NGO-CSW and the program Youth Leaders and Young Professionals in the lead up to the UN Commission on the Status of Women, we will dive into the ways youth storytelling can serve as a catalyst for renewing leadership from the local to the global levels and towards gender equality. I'm very happy to contribute to this series together with my colleagues Tendo and Amanda, with whom we co-organized this webinar with the precious support of the NGO-CSW team and yeah, in particular, Huri, Annabelle and Rachel, and also Devin and Safira and you, Pamela. Tendo Racheal is a social activist from Uganda with an unyielding commitment to justice, equality, and human rights, and her work centers around the fusion of media production and advocacy. Amanda Arroyo Cabezas is the director of programs of Nosotras Women Connecting in Costa Rica, and she has collaborated in the development of educational projects on leadership, menstrual justice, human rights, gender-based violence, and women's political participation. And I am Cécile, and I work alongside cities and regions from all around the world within the largest organization of local and regional governments, which is called United Cities and Local Governments. And there I work with the research and the policy teams on the value of local public services for equality, for care, for youth participation, for poverty, and for climate action, among all like others. For the theme of this webinar, Tendo, Amanda, and I created a question that is at the intersection of our respective areas of work. And it is a challenge because we come from very different backgrounds. We come from Africa, Latin America, and Europe. We have different professional trajectories, but we thought that precisely this would be the most interesting thing to explore. So for the creation of this webinar, we asked ourselves how we can come together and weave our commitments to gender equality so that we make up a moment now where all of us, with you all today, can share ideas about how storytelling can serve as a tool for sparking change and what it means to activate the power of stories. Also, what stories are essential to tell and to make emerge in order to achieve gender equality in our societies and governance systems, and also how storytelling can contribute to redefining leadership in ways that cultivate inclusion, collaboration, and collective responsibility, with this word game I love, referring to the ability to respond to the challenges of our time. So it's response ability. And here, the point of departure for this conversation is that it does matter who tells the story, what stories exactly, and from what point of view, and also how. So today, we hope that our discussions inspire critical and creative thinking on the multiple ways that we young people, young women, can reclaim power and reimagine leadership from the local level to the global level. And I would like us today to sparkle a rich conversation that can help us to inform global advocacy, such as the UN CSW, and change policymaking, with more young people at the table, with more young women listened to and empowered as experts and leaders. And this is absolutely essential to achieve equality among the present generations, but also to prepare a brighter future for generations to come. So we really look forward to diving into this with you all. And concretely, this webinar will be structured around 2 panels, followed by 2 moments of open discussion. And so first, we will explore how we can use storytelling to redefine leadership. And then we will share advocacy strategies to reinforce the participation of young people in decision-making at all levels. So now let's move on to the first panel about youth storytelling to reclaim power and reimagine leadership and create, in the end, new cultures grounded in gender equality. And I would like to invite Tendo. You are part of the Global Youth Fellows for Gender Equality, and as I mentioned earlier, you use storytelling in your work and advocacy for gender equality in Uganda and beyond. So would you like to tell us more about your experience in using digital storytelling as a tool for advocacy, and also how from your work and experience, and also your vision, how we can use storytelling to catalyze policy and societal changes towards new visions for gender equality. So Tendo, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cécile. It's always hard to come after Cécile. She's just amazing. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Tendo Racheal. I am a social activist based in Kampala, Uganda. I am the founder of RTN Digital Agency, which is an organization, a media production organization that aims to dismantle all forms of discrimination, one camera at a time. And I'll start by saying one of the main issues that I found in my journey starting out as an activist is, and I know so many people have interacted with so many activists and they share the sentiment, is the fact that as social activists, we want to do it all. We want to, advocate for each and everyone, because that has everything to do with passion, and we want to do it all. But one thing I keep on saying, which I had to tell myself for the longest time, is unfortunately you can't do it all. And it's for that reason that I started advocating for the digital rights, particularly the digital rights of persons with disabilities. I've done a couple of digital safety, digital security trainings, particularly for persons with albinism, because it's a condition that does not give a lot of confidence. There are a lot of stereotypes around the condition. There are a lot of misconceptions about the condition. So persons with albinism are usually shunned from using social media. They can't confidently use social media like the rest of us. So I felt like it was upon me to kind of share my knowledge in a digital knowledge, basically, with that particular group. I've also done so many other trainings with different groups of marginalized communities in Uganda. And I will say it has been an experience. I've done this work for about 2 years now. And I've worked with amazing organizations like Action Aid, Akina Mama wa Africa, FemFort, and so many others here in Kampala. And each time I'm working on a project, I have to be honest, sometimes I have to pull myself. I need like to first take a breather, within the project, because you hear stories when you're out there in the field, especially if you're serving grassroots communities. You hear stories that are heartbreaking. And no one, and that's the thing, I don't feel like activists talk about mental well-being enough in the work that we do. And it kind of has a toll on you, especially if you're working with grassroots communities. But I will now focus on like digital storytelling and how that does impact the work that we do as advocates and as activists. Everyone has a story. All of us have a story. And, we all say, everyone's story is unique. But if everyone's story is unique, then that means, we're not unique then. But it's hard as an activist to choose what stories to tell. And as Cécile mentioned earlier, it's important who tells the story. And that's something that in my community, we haven't yet grasped as the advocacy circle, as civil society, because it's hard to tell a story that you kind of do not relate to, especially if it is a heartbreaking story. For example, I was doing a story on gender-based violence, and I did this project with Action Aid, and we went to Gulu district. Gulu is a district in the north of Uganda, and we're just documenting survival stories. And I remember I was picked to do that particular project, to document that particular project, because I was a woman. And when I had an interaction with, this was also an initiative of Irish Action Aid, so Action Aid Ireland. And I remember having a conversation with the journalist who was leading the story, and I was like, why did you particularly want a lady to, document this project? And she said, where we are going and the communities that we're serving, one, they're women. Two, they have been traumatized. Three, they because they are women, they just feel more comfortable with a woman around. Some of them, every time they see a man, it traumatizes them. They can't even bring themselves to even talk to a man. So that reminded me of the need to appreciate who tells the story and who is getting this story. I will say that in my few years of digital advocacy, my main focus, as I said, has been persons with disabilities. But even on that journey, even when I'm doing my projects, there are some projects that are hard for me to do because I do not articulate the needs of the community like someone else would. And I've been brought onto panels similar to this situation when you are speaking about advocacy and the topic is, say, leaning towards say again, persons with disability. And I always ask, why are you picking me to speak about persons with disability? All I do is document the stories. There's so many people who could be sitting in this position, or there's so many people you could choose from who will speak about living with a disability in Africa, in Uganda, and how that affects them than me. And that's something that also goes a long way in our politics, in our policy making spaces. There's not so much of the importance of who is telling the story. But away from that, I will say there is so much power in digital storytelling. I've met so many people offline because of the work that they're doing or because of the story that they shared. I am also a teacher. I'm a mentor at an organization called Cameras for Girls that works to empower young girls with the skill for photography, videography, and basically storytelling. And while there's this one project that we did, and we're kind of just unpacking what digital journalism looks like. And I remember telling one of the classes that sometimes you don't always have to be out there in the field to get a story. Technology has come so close to us. There's so many people who are using technology and digital channels to share their stories that it's a matter of you being intentional about what platforms are you spending your time on, what platforms do you source your information from, what platforms are you engaging with, or even what platforms are you using to market your stories and your work in digital advocacy. And the biggest problem with that was now, by the time we see a story, it's maybe from a newsroom, so it's already breaking, it has already broken, if that's a thing. Is there a past tense for breaking news? If that's an actual thing, that there is that a story that's already broken is not.
Wait, you're just muted now.
Sorry about that.
No.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. And I would say it's always interesting to hear young activists. I also consider myself a young activist, but it's also interesting to hear younger activists share their journeys with digital storytelling. I will highlight one digital storyteller here in Uganda, who there was a period when there were like rape accusations. So perpetrators of rape were being outed, particularly on X, formerly Twitter. And it was a whole thing. It was trending in Uganda, especially in our age group, like say 19 to 25. And so many people are being outed for it. And there's another story that came out of a girl who had been raped. And there's a man who came out to say, I remember that night very, very well. She was just so indecently, she was wearing a mini skirt. And there is this feminist, very radical feminist that works with an organization called Femme for Uganda. She's called Patience Ahumuza. She jumped onto that trend and she started a hashtag of wear that mini. And what she did was she got so many people to wear mini skirts. So whether they were going to the supermarket, whether they were going to their jobs, whether they were going out to party, and it was such a radical movement, a digital radical movement, that wear that mini was a trending hashtag for months in Uganda. And that was just to show that mini skirt did not rape. That bar or that alcohol did not rape. It was the man who made a conscious decision to rape that girl. And just seeing that story, because that particular movement happened like when I was just starting my activism journey. And I'll always remember it because I said, this has nothing to do with the organization you're working for. This has nothing to do with the position you hold in society. It has nothing to do with whether you know this person or you don't. But it has everything to do with the fact that you are a human being, and any day, anytime, that could be you. And someone out there will blame a piece of cloth for an action that has happened to you. So it empowered me so much. And I said, I don't need to be, in sitting in very high positions. I don't need to be a policy maker to start advocating. And that's the power of digital advocacy. So I started writing articles, tweets about digital advocacy. If something is happening, I would actively comment on it. And just like that, so many people used to notice me and say, oh, okay, I like what you said, on this particular topic. And the fact that I used to always use images. So some I would use images that I've taken, but if I don't have any image that kind of corresponds with that particular topic, I'll get an image from like the internet, credit the creative or the photographer, and go on with the story. And that's how I started getting into spaces of advocacy organizations. Different organizations would call me and say, we're running this campaign and we think, we need your input in this campaign. Okay, this is what we want. What kind of picture should we take? What kind of video should we take? This is the story we're trying to tell. How can we creatively tell that story? So long story short, as I conclude, I will say that each and every one of us can be a digital storyteller or can be a digital advocate. That is something that you don't need to do an online course. You don't need a diploma. You don't need, as long as you have a voice and you have a platform or a channel to broadcast your voice. We all have a voice, and we should, especially as activists, we should be able to be very vocal about the work that we do, regardless of whether it's about the organization that we're working for or it's about what we're doing personally. And it's for that reason that I've never accepted to work for an organization and kind of like be just part of that organization. I said the work that I do, I can work with different organizations because that also helps me. I'm new, I'm also a young activist, so I want to be in so many different places, in advocacy spaces, to learn and educate myself. Because sometimes as young activists, people say you're just radical, you just use emotion and whatever. I want to step away from that. I want to start advocating from a very informed point of view. I want to go into the space of policymakers and I unpack a law, I unpack an act that is discriminatory to a certain group of the society. I want to say, and I want to be able to contribute to that conversation confidently. So I will end by saying the activism journey or advocacy journey never ends. It never ends. We have to keep on evolving. We have to keep on learning, unlearning. There's a lot of unlearning that has to be done in the advocacy space or in the advocacy world, but also relearning. Sometimes we forget the reasons why we started the work that we're doing. And along the way, we get drifted. And again, I say, we just can't do it all. We really just can't do it all. So I'll end by saying advocacy to the world. And this is a statement that I like using each and every time that I put out a post or about advocacy, and just to inspire me to remember that we are taking it from the local to the global. So thank you so much, Cécile.
No, thank you so much. And your intervention was so rich. So there were like so many things that we could like continue to to discuss today. I'm very glad that you mentioned the importance of social media, its ambiguity also, but also what it allows us to as a tool for storytelling. I'm glad that you mentioned also the issues of equality and representativity. And also you really showed us how stories are very powerful tools, powerful processes. And I think that they can be very hard, but they can be very difficult. And maybe those very hard stories are the most like urgent to share. And I was thinking that, and I was also thinking that maybe also the brightest stories are also crucial, because they're like vehicles for hope, and it's only with hope that we can take action. This also links to what you started saying at the very beginning about mental health. And it's only with hope that we can trust each other, that we can come together and create meaningful alliances and empower, create collective empowerment. So yeah, I'm glad that today in the end we facilitate the sharing of stories, and we try to amplify other voices beyond ours, and this is a huge part of our role, and it's also an honor. So thank you very much. I would like now to go to Amanda. You two are part of the Global Youth Fellows for Gender Equality. You work on leadership in Costa Rica and in other places, and we would love to hear your thoughts too, and in particular, how can young people reclaim power and reimagine the narratives, the governance systems, and the leadership practices towards gender equality and yeah, this collective empowerment that we were mentioning. So dear Amanda, over to you, and thank you very much.
Thank you much, Cécile. And I think it's like a very hard task to follow up with Tendo after her magnificent presentation, but I will do my best. I will also like to start this with something that we did last year at my organization, at Nosotras Women Connecting. And is that the last year we dedicated basically all those months to the approval of a menstrual justice law in our country. So basically, January 1st, we were already working, we were already putting billboards and a lot of signs talking with the Congress members about how important it was, this law. But in the middle of all of this, we understood that we really needed to have something else. Just like this, like about the storytelling, the participation of people, building policies, we need to have like a very multi-sectorial table. You know, we need a lot of voices to raise awareness around this. So we start giving menstrual education workshops. We start doing like all these meta conferences and a lot of things. But something very powerful that we did is that for the Girls' Day, the International Girls' Day, we united 35 girls in the Congress of Costa Rica. This has never been done before. We're talking about little girls between 5 and 8 years old in this place that it's supposed to be only for grown-up people. And they were here with us, and they were creating the agenda of the girls. Basically, they were demanding the Congress people like the needs they have. So we have all this full day with these beautiful and amazing and brilliant girls who spent the day telling the congressman how much they needed clean water, how much they needed a better education in the public system, how much they needed better support for women who wants to be in sports. And one thing that they really called up, it was for menstrual justice. During this workshop we gave them, we told them about the reality of many girls and teenagers and women and people who menstruate in Costa Rica, that many people have to choose between buying a bag of rice or buying a bag of products for menstrual. So it was very interesting to see how these little girls between 5 and 8 years old had such a clear vision of how urgent this law was. Not because they needed, but because they understood that for like the social development of the country, everyone has to be in a good place to do that. So this is what it brings me up to the work we do, like not only in Costa Rica, but in the Latin American region that we work. That when we're working with women, with little girls, with teenagers, what we see them to aim is that they have to understand that leadership is this. You want to help other people to build new realities so you can make changes around not only your community, but the country and more. And this is just like Tendo said, you know, the changes are locally, but it's going to impact globally. And this is the vision we have. I think it's very important when we're talking about making public policy or making, some kind of intervention with governments. We want to create laws in this, to understand that we really need leaderships that are aiming and open to have negotiation tables, dialogues, and to listen to different voices. I think it's very valuable the work we did with the menstrual justice law, not only because we involve a lot of civil society, but also because we managed to connect the Congress people with the people that was in the need of this bill approval. So I think things like that is very important when we start talking about how storytelling can impact the public policy making, the leadership making, and more. One thing I really like to do a call is that organizations, especially like civil society organizations that we work directly with people, is that we really need to reinforce the impact of how we do it, like our educational programs. So for example, one thing we do a lot in our organization is that we reinforce the leadership of women so they can have like a better impact in their, in the work they do. One of our programs is called Soy Valentía, and this is basically how storytelling has been working for us. And Soy Valentía, which means I am brave, is basically a character we created. It's a little girl. She has purple hair. She wears like bold earrings. She has social media, and she posts on Instagram about all the things she's worried about, like climate change and participation and democratic elections and more. And with Valentia, we have been able to reach our most young target audience. And these little girls are connecting with Valentia, and they're working together. They're receiving education processes and more, and it's allowing them to create and build more strong networks and their leaderships to make impact in the world. So for example, we have a lot of students who are now president of their schools. They are like, members of the Congress as ad honorem associates. They are creating build programs. So there's a lot of things that we can do if we start using storytelling as a tool, not only to connect civil society, but as to connect civil society with the leaders. Because after all, and this is something I think is very boring, is that the public policy making, the bills and laws making has become a very close, a very close position. If you want to create a bill, you have to be in the Congress. You have to work with a Congress member or something like that. If you want to create public policy, that's great, but you have to be a public servant. And it's not always like that. We can start creating alliances and dialogues, and this is the way we can start connecting and creating change. Because after that, the people who are working directly with communities, the persons who are working directly with the communities and understanding the needs that they have, are usually us as activists and people who work with communities and local organizations. So that will be like my call to action, like to understand how we can involve storytelling in the work we do, because there's always room for creativity. We can do creative things, we can build a storytelling, we can create new narratives, and which is very important to do right now. The second will be like to understand how we can involve each other with the work we do with the other people who are making already mechanisms, protocols, bills, and different things, to understand how we can work together in different positions. And lastly, which is the one I think is more important, is that we need to understand how can we integrate to all the work we do young people, and not only like, people between 80s and 35 or 20 something, but we need to start raising the voices that are very little. Little girls already have a lot to say. And I'm saying this because I work with them almost every day, and they have a lot to say, and they are like eager to have room and spaces to raise their voices and for people to hear them, basically. So we need to make room for people from all the ages to understand their concerns and how we can build new positions and different spaces so they can grow and have an impact.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and thank you for telling us all, as Tendo, telling us these stories tonight, and showcasing that storytelling can really be an active act or an action towards better responding to the needs and aspiration of different groups, different communities, different people, and in the end transforming, like concretely transforming the way we advance leadership and making it more inclusive and more horizontal. And from the examples you mentioned, we can see very clearly that storytelling, that the specific storytelling that aims at gender equality, that is inspired by feminism, it radically challenges the construction of power in our societies, because as you said, it makes the way for new ideas, but also new voices to emerge and to be really listened to. So I think it's a very important dimension of the conversation today, like the impact and the reach of the stories. And here I also think, like, this is a side note, but I was thinking when you were speaking that we also need to think about how we can, through storytelling, through those stories, also bridge gaps with other generations, and also use it as ways to expand understanding and empathy and solidarity beyond the first, let's say, audiences that we can have. So yeah, thank you again so much. I think the next speaker has problems to join. She's Dede Mason, and I hope she can join later because I was really looking forward to hearing from her. She's the president of the Association of Local Elected Women in Togo. But for now, thank you so much for your contributions to this first part of the conversation, and I really look forward to what will follow. And let's now hear, just before I pass over to you, Amanda, you will facilitate the second panel. Let's just open the floor and see if anyone wants to share a story, wants to share any thoughts or experience around this. Yeah, do let us know. You can raise your hand. I already see a hand raised from Kimberly. So please go ahead and follow her example if you want to intervene as well now. Thank you.
I just had a question for Tendo. She had said we have to unlearn certain things in regards to advocacy. I was just hoping that she can give some examples as to what we have to unlearn. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that question. We all know that most of us, I don't know about the rest of you, but for the activists that I have interacted with, most of them, their journeys, their advocacy journeys started from a point of pain, right? So there's so many people who do the work that they do because it's fueled by pain. They at a certain point had to be, faced an injustice or faced any sort of discrimination that later on, they say, I know there's so many people who are going through the same thing, so I am going to be the voice for those people. I wouldn't want something that happened to me to happen to those people. But there's so much projection, or the way, because when we're doing storytelling and when we're communicating, it's very important for us to kind of figure out how to properly communicate. So there's so many times that activists like that or advocates like that communicate, don't know how to package, their communication. And it's for that reason that there's so many people who are in policy making positions who say we can't have a conversation with radical feminists, or we can't have a conversation with radical advocates, because they just don't know how to communicate, right? To them, everything is an argument. To them, everything is you're silencing them, you are not listening to them. Yet advocacy effort should be a collaborative effort, right? So certain things, and that's just one thing, just how you perhaps you communicate is just one of the things that so many advocates, especially radical advocates, have to unlearn. And there's so many also things of basically even just learning what type of advocate that you are, because there are layers to that, there are categories to that, right? And just having the knowledge to say, I used to be a radical feminist because I was angry, right? I was those advocates who go to the streets and shout and break things, and someone else would say, that's wrong. You're not doing any work. You're not helping anyone, right? So just being knowledgeable and being like open enough to unlearn certain things in your advocacy efforts that would work, especially also understanding the community that you're serving. If that community is not a radical community, or it's not just, people are going to start looking at you like a mad person, then you have to adjust and say, how do I effectively do my advocacy in this particular audience or in this particular society? So there's so many things that you can learn, but I just kind of just offhead, picked those to just elaborate more on the importance of unlearning in the advocacy space.
Thank you, Tendo, for this extensive answer. I don't see any other hands, so just let us know. Oh, now I see one. Emanuela, please go ahead.
Hello, good evening from Nigeria. So thank you very much for this webinar. I fancy myself a storyteller. I've always been telling stories from childhood, particularly fiction. So that brings me to my question, because I have a question. I don't know who's going to answer it. The role of fiction. People take fiction to be child's play, especially here in Nigeria. When you mention fiction and you mention advocacy, they're like, oh, they don't go together. It's not serious. Fiction is not serious. So how can we ensure that they take fiction seriously, and how can I teach younger people how to use fiction in telling these stories that are they are stories that are very important, whether from whatever perspective?
Thank you so much. And I think this is something that we didn't really touch upon. And I think it's a whole other challenge, really. I don't know, maybe if Tendo and Amanda, please jump in if you also want to answer, because for us, in the work that I do, at least with local and regional governments, we don't really engage with fiction as much, and I think we should do. Maybe it's just that because we don't really know exactly how to do it. So I'm not sure to be the best let's say person to answer that, but I do recognize that
we don't have one. But can we say we're bringing a guest?
I think something I can say is that a story can be very powerful. That's the first thing we have to understand. Building storytelling is not only having an idea and you add it with a cute design and it's going to work. It has to be powerful. It has to have a meaning. It has to be guided. And when we talk about fiction, I think there are a lot of different ways we can approach. For example, the book of The Handmaid, I think it's a world-known book, that it's basically a guide of how activism and different positions and, things like that. Movies, for example, are also a very good example of how we can take something that's fictional and try to people to understand how it can affect our daily lives. So what I think it's important is to take the ideas we have and try to grow them in a way that they can be very impactful. For example, right now in the organization I am, we're developing a movie that talks about gender violence. That's the core message we want people to understand. We want people to learn about violence. We're using a movie because we think it's a great resource, but basically it's that we want to teach people that, but we don't say it like that. We're like, oh, it's a road movie about 4 friends who are traveling around the country and a lot of things happen. That's the way we catch people. When people are going to sit down and see the movie, they're going to be like, oh, okay, this is about violence, and the consequences it has on the lives of people and us as a society. So I think it's that you need to understand how to build a key message for people to understand it that way. for example, when we have this bill campaign for menstrual justice, we started with, there's a lot of money that goes to menstrual products, and the households who are more poor are suffering because they have trouble, deciding between what to buy. This was a little bit of like the start of the conversation, but then that turned very easily because we needed people to understand and see it differently. So that conversation we directed and started working on was that if we have poverty, menstrual poverty, the biggest people who are going to suffer this are little girls. And it's not only because they're not going to have pads, it's because they're going to start missing school. And if they miss school, they won't get education. If they don't get education, they won't be able to grow, and it becomes like a chain. So that was the message we started seeing. Not having pads is not just a problem because you just don't have pads. It's because you're losing your life, because you don't have the ability to have autonomy of your life. So I think it's a little bit of that, like how to take the problem and build it in a way that it can like form like a story, like an impactful way to communicate it.
Thank you so much. And Tendo, please go ahead.
Thank you, Amanda. I really like being in a space with like-minded individuals because Amanda has hinted on one of the things that I wanted to do. I'm also very active in the film industry because I actually last year I made a decision that I want to start doing more films, but advocacy films. And right now I'm working on a documentary film about albinism, and it's a heartbreaking tale of how albinism, using one character to kind of just show all the injustices that can happen to a person with albinism at any one point in their lives, as a child, as a teenager, as a young lady, even as a mature lady. But that's whatever Amanda said about like films is great. I'll give you another example of, there is an animator here in Uganda, and he recently got a chance to make an animation for Disney. And it was our very first animation as Uganda on Disney. So, that's an achievement for us. And I remember he was sharing his story of how he got the opportunity to do that. And he said, it was a normal, call, virtual call just like this one. And part of the people on the Disney team kind of were giving him guidelines of what his animation should be about. And he said, that was the point I said, I'm going to say what I'm going to say, and I may lose the chance to do this animation for Disney, but I have to say it. And he uprightly said, I don't want to tell those stories. I want to tell African stories. That's what I do. I want to tell African stories through animation. And he premiered the animation later, like in December last year. And it was basically about the livelihood of a typical African family, but using the sense of technology. So in Africa, we have, having cows. Cattle is a form of wealth. So having so many cows is a sign of wealth. But in his animation, his cows were cars, were flying cars, so it was such a weird blend of things, technology, modern life, but telling an African story. So everything in that animation was typically a normal African setting, that this is a cow, this is a hat, this is a word, but it would turn into something that is powerful. And that's just to show that, the Western world has Teslas, it has Porsches, it has all this. But for us in Africa, we have cattle. That's our wealth. And that was his form of telling an African story through fiction. So fiction is a great way of telling stories, especially if you're telling a story to a new audience. So he knew that this animation was going to feature on Disney. So it's going to be, in the outside countries, Europe, and, people who may not even know what a cow looks like, and he made it a point to use that to tell his African story? How do I tell my African story, but make it more relatable to the audience that I'm speaking to? And later on, maybe someone who doesn't, be like, why are they using cows? What is it about cows? And that's when they'll know that, back in Africa, having cows is a form of wealth. And, so there's so many ways you can play around with fiction, whether it's animation, whether it's a film, whether it's, just like skits and just acting. So please don't stop using fiction. And sometimes it's also important because, again, I say when we're doing some of the stories that we do, they're so traumatizing that people are not comfortable saying them as them. So then you have to find a way of still telling their story without having to put their face on that story. So then what you have to do is find creative ways of playing around with that story, but being able to deliver the message that you want to deliver.
Thank you so much. And I guess we should move on to the next panel, and we will have another moment of discussion because this is like maybe the richest part of this event. I just wanted to maybe conclude, like not concluding, but just like closing for just now, this moment on storytelling and its power to reimagine leadership towards gender equality in the just recalling that everything that we talked about now shows how much storytelling bits based on let's say real stories or real stories through fiction articulates in the end individual trajectories and social and political movements, and it brings local aspirations to a global conversation or to global advocacy. And maybe this will be what we will focus on now around advocacy and youth participation. So thank you so much to everyone, and over to you, Amanda, for the next panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cécile. Maybe I would like to ask if we can put the next panelists also pinned up to the screen so everyone can see them. And it's going to be Arlie, Fernanda, and Marisela. So if anyone can help me with that, that will be great. So our second panel for today is a panel on advocating for the participation of young people in policymaking from local to the global. Personally, I think this is one of the most important things we have to start discussing right now. We have a lot of countries where with amazing advocates, organizations, not-profit, civil society leaders who are making a huge impact in the communities they work with and are creating different process to, build changes in their countries. So today our panel is going to be confirmed with 3 people. The first one is Marisela Zamora. She's the Executive Director of Nosotros Women Connecting, the place I work at. Then we have Fernanda Vázquez. She's an advocacy officer of Elige, Red de Jóvenes por los Derechos Sexuales y Reproductivos, which is a network in Latin America that works with young people for their sexual and reproductive rights. And lastly, we're going to have Uri. She's the pastor and the forum producer of the NGO CSW in New York. So very excited for all of you to hear of them and learn a lot. I will start with Marisela maybe. So Mary, we have known each other for almost a decade. I got to realize that yesterday. And I see how your path has been tangled between activism, art, social change, leadership, building communities. And of course, all of this led you to build Nosotras Women Connecting, which is a very powerful organization. But I have to ask you something. Can you share us your journey and tell us, in all of these years, in everything you have learned, what do you think is the role of the emerging leaders in building solutions that can be taken from the local scenario to the global path?
Thank you so much, Amanda, and thank you so much to everyone here. I feel so glad and honored to be sharing this panel with amazing leaders. I started as an emerging leader. I started really, really young. I started in my high school, and then I got involved in local politics in my hometown, and I have to say it was really hard for me to be respected, to be heard, as a leader and as a young woman in my country. And I think one of the main things that I learned in that journey of, expecting to be heard and to be taken seriously as a leader, was to realize that we had a huge responsibility, that we have to study more, prepare more, but that, and I know this is a reality for women, and then if you see it like with the intersectional point of view, it gets even worse. But right now, I feel really grateful I had to do that, because it gave me the strength to have these points of view that are like coming from different places. So and I had to be really smart, right? Like how to manage people, and especially how to manage older, much older people than me that had these points of view of how to make things. And I think this is the key role of emerging leaders. And I think that one of the responsibilities of young leaders is to study a lot, to work really hard, to be really open to new ideas. But one of the most important responsibilities is to bring the ideas from an innovative point of view, and from these young people they have. And I say they because I stopped being young last year, of bringing new ideas and then new points of view to whatever we're fighting for. And I think this was one of the things that I struggle most in my first year as a young leader, as an emerging leader, was that I had this. I'm a filmmaker and a theater producer. I come from that part, so I just wanted to bring something different, and I think that's the key part of young people, is that they can contribute from these points of view, from this sensibility that emerging leaders and these points, how they feel the world and how they want to change it. And I think this is why we need to keep working and giving tools and giving spaces to younger generations. And of course, younger generations have the responsibility to be studying, to be working, to be listening, because it's so hard for young people to listen. Like, I remember it was so hard for me because I was sure I was right about everything. But I learned with the time that I was not right about everything. And it was very nice, because I think I realized that sooner rather than later. I had very good people next to me who was giving me advice, but it was so important for the other people that were older that they were making space for me. And I think this is our role right now. Like I manage an organization that is especially focused on younger women and girls, and every time we're trying to work with younger and younger, and now we're working with girls of 8 years old, as Amanda said earlier. And they are amazing how generations come with new ideas. And I was seeing 8-year-old girls saying things that I was like, oh my God, I wish I was like that when I was 8. So this is how generations are growing, and they're becoming smarter, and they're becoming more courageous to say the things that they want to say. And of course, it has to do with access to technology, to access to education. And this is the importance to bring them in, but not to bring them in because of the sake of bringing them in, because they are part of the decision making. They are part of the world that we're living. And if we're not giving any space to them, like how can we build a world that they are going to be living in, like in, I don't know, 10 years, right? So one of the things that I've learned last year is like decision makers in any level, they have to make decisions thinking about 3 generations ahead. So if you're making decisions thinking about 3 generations ahead, for sure you need the younger people to be there next to you, and to have to back you up in your blind sides. Because when you become older, of course, you have the points of view of an older person. Of course, you have more maturity, and you have like so many things that years give you, but you have blind sides. And I think young people, make you stronger in that part. And of course, decision-making places. I'm not saying only to bring young people to, dialogues and everything. It's important to give them power, because we always, yesterday I heard one of our young leaders in Nosotras saying like, oh, they always say we're the future. We're not the future, we're the present. We're living right now, and we are experimenting consequences of your decisions, of politicians' decisions right now. So I think we have to stop romanticizing youth as the future, and thinking about youth as the present, and as a very energetic present. And I think young generations, mostly the ones who want to get involved with, have a very big responsibility of bringing other people in, and just to make people to care. And that is very important. If people don't care, they don't get involved. We don't press politicians, we don't press decision makers, and we don't make pressure over there. And so we won't have change. So I think that's one of the most important things, to make room for younger voices, but not only voices, but also decision making. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary, because that last part that you said, it's going to toggle very good with my question to Fernanda. You said that it's very important to be courageous, and I think the word that Red and Fernanda is doing in Latin America around sexual and reproductive rights needs a lot of courageous action. It's not easy to do that job, and we really admire like the work you'll do. But it brings me to this question for you, Fernanda, like as an activist, as a feminist, as a decolonial feminist, actually, like advocacy officer of La Red. How do you approach this fight for the rights of women in sexual and reproductive rights? What are the challenges you have encountered? We know our region has become more close and close to these topics, and there's like a lot of challenges we have to face. So maybe you could share us an example of your experience and how important it is like to raise our Latin American voices, in different and international events. So yeah, maybe you could go with that.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you to this group for inviting me today to speak with you. It's such an honor to be part of this NGO-CSW in the operative way and working with the recommendations, but it's also great to have this connection with young people. So thank you so much for having me today. And answering to your question, how do we approach the fight for rights on women in Latin America? In Elige, we work through 4 areas, which is advocacy, training, communication, and research. I am in charge of the advocacy area. So from advocacy, our work is to participate in regional and international events to position our agenda based in human rights. This is so important to make that clarification. This advocacy can be with government, UN agencies, or another civil society organization. That's why we are part of the NGO-CSW, especially in Latin America. So that's our connection. But I think the way that we work now is through these spaces, but like we want people to know about their sexual and reproductive rights. It's so hard because in Latin America, and I imagine, and there's another countries and regions where that happened, but sexuality is it still a taboo, and is it still a taboo for young and adolescents and these young people. So I think that's hard. And in that sense, we've been fighting with some challenges. I can see 3 like major challenges. One is regressive human rights movement, because they are having more power now, like in the United Nations or in other regional spaces. So it's important to mention this because on many occasions are against feminism and the participation of women and youth people. So I think it's important. And I also believe that there are some other movements that are not respecting the autonomy of young people or adolescents. And this is a complex issue for us to work because they limit our participation. And that is related with the second challenge, because I still see some adultocentrism in international spaces and regional spaces. And that's hard. And it's also hard because those spaces are super close and you can engage with them. At least you have like an experience or that you have mentors. It's so complicated for young people to get involved with United Nations because they see United Nations as this bigger thing that exists in the world. But how do we engage if they don't listen my country, my government, how my government is going to listen me and how United Nations is going to listen me? So I think this is so important. I'm privileged to work in an organization that already has like a 20 years experience working with advocacy in so many levels, but it's hard to be in those spaces. So I guess like as as youth people, we should work on that and we should make more networks to help another young people to be in those spaces. But an idea come up in my mind. So the third major challenge that I see are the inequalities that continue to affect youth around the world, especially those from from the global south, because it's also a privilege to be able to work in those spaces because we are not impacted by those inequalities in that big way. I mean, we have a house, we have food, and I think those inequalities are making even harder for young people to be involved in social justice. And I think that is also hard because you can make them responsible for being involved in those issues when they doesn't have the basic human rights covered. So I guess those are like the big three major challenge that I see. And as an example, last year I was privileged to be one of the young leaders and young professionals of the NGO CSW at CSW. So I was there. It was great. It was great to be and to see how those international spaces work. It's really complex. It's not that easy and it's so tiring, but it's great. It's great to be there and to connect with another young people from all over the world and with feminists from all over the world, because you can learn and you can have new ways to fight for our rights in a region. So I think that's great. And the community that you form with people there, it's amazing. So yes, we were able to connect with other young youth people from all over the world, but we were also able to do advocacy with our governments since we were part of the official delegation of Mexico. So we were in the negotiation. Civil society organization can't speak in the negotiation, but we were hearing and listening and learning. So that was an extremely great opportunity for me and for youth in general. And yeah, we did advocacy with our government. Like, no, Mexico, you can say that. You have to say it in this way, or you have to look out for youth rights. So I think that's also important, and I feel like that's the major point of advocacy, like putting the agenda of human rights there. And finally, just to close, why is so important that young women voices are heard in those spaces? For us, it's important because it's a way to represent and to say our needs and demands to our governments and to this international structure. Also because according to the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, to participate and to be able, to be involved in those issues, it's all right. So we have to fight for that right. And also because it's a way to make sure that the rest of our human rights are guaranteed, right? So we fight for the right to participate, but we also fighting for our right to have access to sexual and reproductive rights, to have access to water rights, to food right. So I think it's a way to make sure that all the other human rights are covered. And it's also necessary because we are living, as Marisela, I think it's her name, said before, we're living in this crazy world, and we're seeing and we're living the consequences that people are taking the decisions. So we are seeing this world from another perspective, and those perspectives needs to be included in the way that the world is changing. So I think I will close in that. And thank you so much for having me. And I hope I was clear. I feel like I talked a lot, but I hope I was clear. Thank you so much.
It was perfect. Thank you so much, Fernanda. I think there's something very important, and is that we already have like the tools, we have knowledge, we have been working with different spaces, communities, and organizations. But what we need the most is different spaces where we can raise our voices, raise our concerns. And this is what you said, like connect with the governments and be like, you need to be acknowledged in this. And those things are very important. And this brings me to Hori, because at the end, the NGO CSW has been doing an amazing work connecting non-profit organizations all around the world, basically, with United Nations, between them, with you as an organization. You have now these amazing youth fellows that are all over the world doing an amazing job. So the work you're doing is truly important to raise voices and raise awareness of different topics. And it brings me to this important question for you as an activist, as part of NGO CSW. How do you believe NGOs can contribute to these global gender equality efforts, and what key initiative or change do you have like most promising in all this crazy world, as Maricela said?
Thank you, Amanda. I mean, I don't know how to follow both Maricela and Fernanda, who I've known now for quite a few years, and so grateful for your energy, your ideas, and what a fellow you were last year. And and actually, that's what I would like to pick up on, which is related to what you were saying. NGO CSW has just been responding and reacting to civil society's needs, right? And it just makes me so proud to be part of this organization. And so many of our executive committee members are on this call. And if they can introduce themselves, it would be great, because I want to honor those who are taking the time to join us. And back to the, and of course, Women Have Wings has to really be mentioned here too, because if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't go from 5 to 20. You know, we started with like, you know, we'll definitely recognize some youth members. And I have to say, it's one of the reasons why I love being part of NGO CSW, but for the last 12 years, because each of the leaders in the last 12 years has moved the needle a little bit to bring in more youth members, right? And then, of course, now in the last couple of years, we've just catapulted Devin and Safira, who are not with us anymore, but really need to be mentioned, because if it wasn't for their recommendation and Women Have Wings and Eliza's approval, we would not have gone from 5 to 20. And it's really important to start the conversation from there, because it's that kind of growth that I'm proud to be part of. And it is a lot of work. And if this meeting is not proof that it was worth doing this, I don't know what else is. Like, we're so impressed. We're texting each other on the side and saying, are you listening to these young people? And I think it's really important to also recognize, and I know this was mentioned by Marcella as well, that it's an intergenerational collaboration, right? Because a lot of times when we bring in youth over the years, I've gotten pushback from, what about older people? What about widows? What about
sex workers or LGBTQI community. Every community is important, but this specific dialogue between younger generation and experienced generation is so important, because we need your energy to keep going. And a lot of times, like I think Tendo mentioned too, is like the unlearning for us is very important, because when we're working with young people, and right now I'm actually sitting in our office and facing our young staff, and without them, I really could not do what I do, because they inspire me and encourage me to go forward. But to go back to the meat of your question, all of this is really to make a difference in this world, right? And one of the things I've learned is that the people that I meet in this world, in the human rights world, everybody's here for a purpose. Most of them is not to really for a paycheck, although we must get paid and it's important to be recognized for it. We're doing this because something in our past, in our history, has moved us to stand up and say, this is not fair, and somebody needs to speak up. And there's plenty of examples, Malala and the climate justice youth, that it's youth that has moved the needle so many times after years of experienced people and PhDs, papers, writing papers. All of that is important. I do not want to diminish that, but it's really the aspiration of youth who stands up and says, I need to be heard. It's my future. It's my life. And then for us to make the space on the table to welcome them, right? Because we should be threatened by, well, you don't have experience, what can you offer? Or for youth to say, you guys are so old and doing things in so ancient way that there's no way I can even talk to you. It's got to come to some kind of an understanding where it is intergenerational dialogue. And the most important thing that I see what NGO CSW does, and what I like to influence people with, is what we call pay it forward. So it's great to have space, and this is not about youth, or it's just for anybody. It's great that we make room for people to come and do parallel events or create dialogue on round tables, discussions. But then what are you doing with that information? And I see youth doing this better than anybody I know, especially with social media, where you take the information and you bring it to your friends, to your social media, and sharing it makes a huge difference. So it's like you need to keep adding more people into the circle, because the more of us are in this conversation, the more success we're going to get. And this is really important too, because as much as we're proud of what we have achieved, inevitably every year we have to slow down and discuss the pushback on how countries, including Mexico, Argentina, the United States, next November, we could go backwards in an instant if our elections don't go well. That is so important for young people to understand, that no matter where you're at in your education, in your head, in your activities, if you can vote and if you can make people go out and vote, it's the only thing we have left right now to keep fighting for what we have. And of course, we know many countries are so corrupt that sometimes people say, well, why should I vote? Because the winner is already determined. I think it's important to get past that and to really take your future into your own hand and say, I am going to speak up. I mean, I know you're all doing this already, so I feel like I'm talking to the converted, but I hope that this message goes, again, like I said, beyond table, right? We just keep paying it forward. And I want to use Fernanda as an example of how courageous young people can be. I'm not saying that people my age cannot be, because listen, if I wasn't courageous, I wouldn't be sitting here trying to organize a forum. That does take courage. But I think it's really important to see that sparkle in the eye that people like Fernanda bring to the table. It's just that, yes, I can do it. Yes, whatever we ask, like, of course I can do it. And I'm noticing this with our new cohort of 20 fellows. So I really can't wait to meet you all even more and get to know about you. And finally, I think I will close by saying, and this is important, yeah, the courageous and the creative thinking is connected. And I think Tendo mentioned this, and I think I think a few other people mentioned this. The self-care is important. Like, we work so hard, all of you work so hard. I'm just so impressed with the reaction and the stepping up to deliver in what we are asking you to do. But I'm also saying that we should all encourage each other to take time off, to really reflect on, how is this work affecting my mental health, and how can I take care of myself so that I can keep doing what I'm doing. And just a few days ago, I saw a movie that I hope everybody gets a chance to see. It's called Origin by Duvernay. It's based on a book. I'll try to share the link later. I think what that movie did, again, to just connect it back to all the creative inputs we had earlier about documentaries and fiction. It's so important the way we tell our stories to inspire and start changing our minds, the relearning, right? The movie Origins is all about, how do we look at race that is more inclusive and brings all conversations to the table, because sometimes our opposition intentionally pushes us into corners to fight just for reproductive rights, to fight just for race, because that keeps us occupied. And while they're doing everything else that they're doing, which is either in the caste system or finance, or all of the others that should be considered as a whole. And I'm sorry if I spoke too much, but I am here to answer more questions. I'm so grateful you asked me to speak, and thank you all for all your hard work.
No, thanks to you. I think I speak for everyone here that we admire you so much, and always listening to you is like a master class. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing everything with us. So we're heading a little bit back on time, so I think we'll have time for 1 or 2 questions. But before that, I would only like to recap 3 things from this panel. Well, the first one is that as an activist and as organizations, we really need to come together and work to build not only the future, but the present that we have right now. And here, intergenerational is vital. We need to hear all the voices, the little girls, older women, everyone from every ages. So we need to start listening to many voices as we can to start building like true dialogues. The second is this: we need to start unlearning and learning, because this is vital to create. And the third one is that we need to connect with people who share our vision, because even as we're already convinced of this fight, this is a way to keep us inspired to build change. It's like our safe network where we can rely and start building well, significant relationships to keep working hard. So now I think we'll have time for a couple questions. I don't know if someone would like to add something. It could be in the chat or opening the microphone. Okay, I don't see any hand raise. So maybe I would like to ask one, and it's for the 3 of you, just to close up this panel. And it will be like, what will be a message not only for your younger self, but these young women who are starting in their advocate path? And that, as Fernanda said, the dream is like to be like in these international events and doing public policy and advocating and changing the world. What will be the key message for them in this new path they are starting to go on? Maybe we can start with Fernanda.
Yes, thank you so much. I think it will be sound a little bit corny, but I guess that keep dreaming and keep believing in those dreams that are possible. Maybe sometimes you will feel that none of those dreams are possible because the world itself is so overwhelming. but those dreams are beautiful and you have to still believe in them because you have this network of people who would support your crazy dreams, because we want that. We want a better world for everyone where we can live together in peace, of course, and where we can be ourselves. So yeah, that.
Thank you so much. Mari?
For me, I would say to my younger self, and I'm sure to many young leaders here, be patient, learn as much as you want, manage your energy and your emotions. And this is like super highlighted because it is a long run. This is like we're here for a long run. I'm sure I'm not going to see some of the dreams that I have, but I am going to see a little part of them. So for that, just manage your energy, take care of yourself, take care of your body, take care of your soul, take care of your brain, and don't stop believing, because I think that great achievements take time. And if you're patient enough and you work with your community with a clear vision, bringing everybody together to the table, and if the table gets smaller, just bring more chairs, build a larger table, and bring as many as people as you can. And of course, taking care of yourself, it's key for you to stay here for the long run.
Thank you so much. And Ori?
Yes, I mean, I agree 100%. I don't want to repeat what Maricela said, but also it's my state of mind right now, and everybody who knows me will probably say yes. I definitely recommend chilling more, relaxing more, because I get so anxious. I want to get things done so fast that I can't relax. So I would say, tell my younger self and my young friends, do more meditation, do a little bit more yoga, and know that, like Maricela said, it will take time. Don't give up on it. Never, ever give up. Just keep working at it, but pace yourself. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, David, for your view. It was an amazing panel, and what a privilege it was like to direct it. Before I go back to Tendo, who's going to do the conclusion of this panel, I would like to invite everyone to check out the other series that is going to be happening. The titles are amazing. The people who are going to be presenting them, it's amazing. You can learn a lot about them. And before Tendo speaks, I would like to reinvite everyone to share their social networks and their contacts in the chat so we can connect between everyone, because there's also room to create and do alliances. So thank you so much for being with us. And Tendo, the floor is yours to do the conclusion of today.
Okay, thank you so much, Amanda, for leading that amazing panel, and all our panelists. I could sit here and listen to amazing women speak. I could sit here all night just to listen to amazing women speak. I would like to conclude this session, but before I do, I would like to give a very, very big hand clap to us, the three Global Youth Fellows that have hosted this very first youth preparation series. But most importantly, I would like to thank NGO CSW for giving us an opportunity to network, to voice the work that we're doing, because there's so many people out there doing amazing things, but they don't have platforms that they can share their work to. And I'm so glad and honored to be part of this group, and all the 90 plus people that have joined us on this webinar. Thank you for being with us for all this time. I know somewhere in the world it's like midnight or 1 a.m., but you have stuck with us till the end. I will like to highlight one important thing before I close. Is there's this tiny pin that I have. I don't know if you guys can see it. It's a tiny pin that says the feminist revolution must center radical rest. And for me, each time I feel a burnout, each time I feel like, is this work all worth it? At the end of the day, we're all gonna die. I kind of just always get it and pin it on whatever clothes I'm wearing, even on my pajamas, guys. I sleep with it just to remind me to rest, just to remind me to breathe, to remind me to kind of go back to and remember why I started the work that I'm doing now. And maybe lastly, I would like to say maybe one thing that we should also consider in the activist movement is protection of activists, especially those who deal with very, very dicey and complicated stories. That is something that's happening in Uganda. So many people are so many activists are losing their lives, are in danger because of the work that they're doing that is against what the government wants or what the government agenda is. So I would like to hear more of those conversations because, it's important. We have a saying in Luganda that goes omulamu yakola, which the translation is only alive people can work. I mean, you can't work from your grave. So in whatever that you're doing, you have to protect yourself first and make sure that you are well, you are sane, and you're willing to give back. So thank you so much to each and everyone who has joined. And we cannot wait to see how the other series are going to be. Please stay tuned for all of them. They're going to be even more amazing. We're going to have amazing speakers and amazing information sharing and networking. So from me, Tendo, and the team, from Amanda, from Cécile, we say thank you so much for joining, and we cannot wait to see you in the next series.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night.
Goodbye.